All right, we're about to dive into a story that spans 1,000 years. It's a story of how a brand new faith, born right out in the desert, gave rise to some of the world's greatest empires, an unbelievable golden age of science, and, yeah, some cataclysmic wars that would totally reshape the globe. This is the story of the Caliphate. So picture this, it's the 6th century. The Arabian Peninsula is kind of seen as the backyard of two massive powers. You've got the Christian Byzantine Empire to the west and the Persian Sasanian Empire to the east. Arabia itself, it's mostly home to nomadic, polytheistic Arab tribes. And it's from this place, this seemingly quiet landscape, that something absolutely world-changing is about to explode onto the scene. So, where does this all start? Well, it begins with the Prophet Muhammad, who unites the Arab tribes under the new monotheistic faith of Islam. But then in 632 CE, he dies. And this creates a huge crisis. I mean, who's going to lead this brand new unified community now? And the answer they came up with was the Caliph, which just means successor. The first four of them, known as the Rashidun, or rightly guided, were all picked because they were close to the Prophet. And in just 30 years, they oversaw this colossal expansion, creating a massive empire. But here's the thing. This so-called Golden Age, it was also incredibly violent. In fact, three of those first four caliphs were assassinated, which tells you everything about the tensions bubbling just under the surface. Yeah, the question of who should lead was far from settled. And this right here, this brings us to the single question that would cause the biggest, most permanent split within Islam. Who has the right to lead? So basically, two big answers emerged. One group, who would become the Shia, were insistent. Leadership has to stay in the Prophet's bloodline, starting with his cousin and son-in-law, Ali. But the other group, who became the Sunnis, argued that no, the community should choose the best person for the job. And what started out as, a political disagreement would eventually become the greatest religious rift in all of Islam. So after those first four caliphs, the whole game changes. The first hereditary dynasty, the Umayyads, take over. They move the capital to Damascus and launch a second huge wave of conquests, building an empire that stretched all the way from Spain to Central Asia. But even when they were at their absolute biggest, the caliphate was just riddled with rebellions from the inside. Then, in 750 CE, bam, the Umayyads are overthrown, and I mean brutally overthrown, by a new dynasty, the Abbasids, and they were a major shift. Instead of just focusing on more expansion, they turned their attention inward. They wanted to build and cultivate the empire they now had. And their first big move? Something incredibly ambitious. They decide to build a magnificent new capital city from scratch. And that city? It was Baghdad. It became the beating heart of the Islamic world almost overnight, a hub for culture, science, and trade. This is the city you read about in the Arabian Nights. It was so legendary that the caliph there was pen pals with Emperor Charlemagne all the way over in Europe. I mean, think about that. Now, the engine of this whole golden age was a place called the House of Wisdom. The scholars there in Baghdad didn't just translate old Greek, scientific, and philosophical texts into Arabic. No, they used them as a launchpad, making these huge leaps forward in medicine, in astronomy, in mathematics. They literally invented algebra here. It was a true multicultural center for learning. But you know how these stories go. This amazing unity, it wasn't going to last. Starting around the 9th century, this incredible unified empire starts to crack. The Abbasid caliphs back in Baghdad start to lose their grip on all their territories, and the whole Islamic world just starts to splinter apart. So this becomes the new reality. The The Sunni Abbasid Caliphate is still in Baghdad, sure, but he's kind of becoming just a symbol, a figurehead without real power. Over in Egypt, a powerful Shia dynasty, the Fatimids, set up their own rival caliphate in their new capital, Cairo. And meanwhile, way over in Spain, what's left of the old Umayyad dynasty is just ruling on its own. The political unity? Yeah, that was completely gone. And right into this messy, divided world, a new power rides in. They're called the Seljuk Turks, nomadic warriors, tough guys from the steppes of Central Asia. They convert to Sunni Islam, sweep into the Middle East, and in 1055, they take control of Baghdad itself. So these Seljuks, they take the title of Sultan and basically become the muscle, the military protectors of the Abbasid Caliph. But just as they're getting settled, a whole new threat shows up, this time from the west. In 1095, European crusaders invade the Holy Land. This kicks off centuries of conflict and leads to the rise of incredible figures like the great Kurdish general Saladin, who would eventually take Jerusalem back. The Middle East was this incredibly complex chessboard, right? You had all these rival powers, but every single one of them was about to face a threat that was just on another level. Far to the east, Genghis Khan had united the Mongol tribes, and they were riding west. And the reports coming in, they were terrifying. People said they were invincible, merciless. So, 1258, Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu shows up at the gates of Baghdad. His demand is simple: surrender. But the Caliph, he refuses. And what happened next was a siege that ended in just complete and utter destruction. When the walls fell, the city was burned to the ground, its people were massacred, and the great library, the famous House of Wisdom, was totally destroyed. All those books, centuries of knowledge, just gone. And just like that, with the smoke rising from Baghdad, the Islamic Golden Age was over. The symbolic heart of the civilization had been ripped out. The Mongols looked unstoppable. I mean, who could possibly stand up to them? After wrecking Baghdad, they turned towards Egypt. But there, they were about to run into something and someone totally unexpected. A new power that had risen from the ashes of Saladin's old dynasty. These guys were called the Mamluks. So, for centuries, Muslim rulers had this system. They'd bring in young Turkic boys from the steppes as slaves, convert them to Islam, and then train them to become this super elite warrior class, whose only loyalty was to the ruler. But in 13th century Egypt, something incredible happens. A total reversal. This warrior class, the Mamluks, they decide they've had enough of serving. They seize power for themselves. They literally overthrow their masters and start their own kingdom, the Mamluk Sultanate. The slaves had just become the masters. And right away, they proved just how tough they were. In 1260, at a battle called Ain Jalut, the Mamluks did what nobody thought was possible. They beat the Mongols. They stopped that westward steamroller for good. And then, for good measure, they went and crushed the last of the Crusader kingdoms. After those two victories, they earned a legendary title, the Defenders of Islam. Okay, so the Mongol invasions completely shattered the old world. But out of those ashes, a new era began. This was the age of what historians call the gunpowder empires. Brand new, powerful, stable states that would run the Islamic world for hundreds of years. So, three huge powers rise up in this new era. You've got the Shia Safavid Empire in Persia, which basically lays the groundwork for modern Iran. Over in India, the Mughal Empire gets going. But the biggest, most dominant one of them all, that was the Ottoman Empire. After conquering Constantinople in 1453, the Ottoman Sultan captured Cairo in 1517, ending Mamluk rule, and declared himself the new caliph for all of Sunni Islam. And the Ottoman Empire wasn't a flash in the pan. It would last for 600 years, 6 centuries. It was a global superpower, and it would be the very last caliphate in the history of Islam, only finally collapsing after the First World War in the 20th century. So think about that journey from a leadership crisis in the Arabian desert all the way to a globe-spanning empire that lasts 600 years. The story of the caliphate is just incredible. And it leaves us with a really big question. How does this thousand-year legacy of law, science, borders, and faith, how does all of that still shape the world you and I live in today?